Hi, everyone. This is Gayle, and welcome to Overcoming the Obstacles. Tonight, we are doing a Bible study on Leah. Difficult, I won't say difficult, but this lady had a challenging life, shall we say. Um, I am a former pastor. I'm on with Stellarpiper over here. And Stellar, you can just say who you are.
I'm a seminary graduate and I've worked in churches for years.
So there we go. So without further ado, we're just going to go ahead and dive right in. And we're looking at the story as in Genesis 29. But we are going to skip around just a little bit reading the scripture because it is very, very long. And because we want to encourage you to look it up and study also. Now, all of the questions are down below in the chat box, discussion box rather, and she's posted a link to the scripture in the chat box. So come join us if you want to. There we go. All right, Stellar, you head off here.
All right, I'm going to start at the top of the chapter.
Okay.
Then Jacob went on a journey and came to the land of the people of the east. As he looked, he saw a well in the field, and 3 flocks of sheep were lying there beside it, for out of that well the flocks were watered. The stone on the well's mouth was large, and when all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place on the mouth of the well. Jacob said to them, "My brothers, where do you come from?" They said, "We are from Haran." He said to them, "Do you know Laban, son of Nahor?" They said, "We do." He said to them, "Is it well with him?" "Yes," they replied, "and here is his daughter Rachel coming in with the sheep." He said, "Look, it is still broad daylight. It is not time for the animals to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go pasture them." But they said, "We cannot until all the flocks are gathered together, and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep." While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she kept them. Now when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of his mother's brother Laban, and the sheep of his mother's brother Laban, Jacob went up and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of his mother's brother Laban. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman, and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. And I am skipping ahead and picking up in Genesis 29, verse 21. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife that I may go into her, for my time is completed." So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. But in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her maid. When morning came, it was Leah, and Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me?" Laban said, "This is not done in our country, giving the younger before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also in return for serving me another 7 years." Jacob did so and completed her week. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel as a wife. Laban gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her maid. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah. He served Laban for another 7 years.
Wow. So he made the agreement originally to serve 7 years to receive Rachel as his bride, except what happened was he got cheated, which is interesting because Jacob himself had done some cheating in his life to steal the birthright from his brother. So, but poor Leah, I feel so sorry for her.
I do too.
Because she didn't have a choice. She had to go and do what her father told her to do. And that was to go get married. And then she wasn't even immediately, he went ahead and married somebody else the week after they were married.
Yep.
You married her sister.
I can't help but wonder how Leah felt about all of that. I mean, we know from later passages that it did not help any sibling rivalry that went on between the two of them.
That is true. But
But
God really honored it, honored her agree. I don't know if you want to call it agreement, but he honored her union with Jacob a little bit more than he honored Rachel's. And then later we really see that she was honored more than Rachel, even by Jacob. So it's interesting. So you got to the point where she has been given to Jacob, and she's been given a servant also by her father. And we want to make sure that people understand that Laban, Leah and Rachel's father, is the brother to Jacob's mother. So basically, he goes to his uncle and says, I want to marry my cousin because she's beautiful and because your flocks are so nice. So you even kind of have to wonder, beyond beauty, there's this other advantage of her father's flocks. And by working for Laban, he would have known exactly how to take care of the flocks to make them just as nice as his uncles.
Oh, for sure. And that comes up later. A couple chapters later, Jacob winds up cheating Laban out of a substantial portion of his flock.
Portion of his flock. He does. He's good at cheating and tricking.
Yeah, Jacob was a little bit of a trickster.
How he got his birthright, but the tide turned a little bit, or the tables turned when, after he was married and found out the night after they consummated the wedding that, oops, he married the wrong sister. Like, how do you even do that? But anyway, obviously the veil was very thick. And then that following week, after he did 7 days with his first wife, that was kind of a customary period. And then after that, he gets to marry Rachel, who is the favorite.
As long as he works another 7 years. So they were both tricking each other.
And then he serves. Yeah. But he had already worked 7 years and for Rachel and then got Leah. Then he agreed to go ahead and get Rachel and then work another 7 years. So 14 years in total went into this. And so here we have at this point Leah, who at the end of the week sees her husband married to, of all people, her sister. And we don't have indication that she wanted to do this or agreed to do this or anything like that. And even with that, it says in here that Rachel was, his love for Rachel, this is going on over to verse 30. Jacob made love to Rachel, and his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah. You just have to feel so bad for her because she would be so devastated. Here she is. She's got her one chance at marriage, and he doesn't love her. He loves Rachel.
Yeah, and you can see that in what she names her sons.
Yes.
I'm just going to pick up in 31.
Okay.
When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Leah conceived and bore a son, and she named him Reuben, for she said, because the Lord has looked on my affliction, surely now my husband will love me. She conceived again and bore a son, and said, because the Lord has heard that I am hated, he has given me this son also, and she named him Simeon. Again she conceived and bore a son, and said, now this time my husband will be joined to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore he was named Levi. She conceived again and bore a son, and said, this time I will praise the Lord. Therefore she named him Judah. Then she ceased bearing.
So the significant. Go ahead.
I have a footnote
Yeah.
in my Bible that says
Okay.
Reuben's name translates to see a son.
But it was pretty significant that Leah bore a son, um, not just a son, but she bore the first son.
Yes.
Sons were the ones who would be inheriting. Normally, it would be the first son that would be inheriting. So that solidified her position as matriarch in the family more so than the favored Rachel.
Yes, it did.
So by being chosen as Jacob's wife instead of Rachel, um, Laban tricked him, and then God honored what Leah did. But we see some indications in this passage about how Jacob felt about her in, as you pointed out, the naming of her sons. Because the progression, she became pregnant and gave birth to Reuben, who you said translates into see a son, and the son will, was the first son, like I said, that would inherit. Then she conceived again, and then she said, because the Lord heard that I am not loved. So she still, after her second pregnancy, is still not loved, and she's in that position. So she's kind of been used as a pawn in exchange for free labor. Um, and now she's become pregnant the second time, and she's still not loved. Then she conceived again and said, now at least he'll become attached to me. It's a third son. Surely by now he is going to at least be attached to me. If he doesn't love me, we'll always have this attachment, and, maybe he'll change his thinking. And then she conceived again and gave birth to another son. And this time she's praising God for the sons. Because even if Jacob doesn't love her, she has these sons, and they're going to be taking care of her into her old age. Um,
So, in a way, her situation is the opposite of Ruth and Naomi.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see where you're going with that, because Ruth and Naomi, who we talked about in other Bible studies, and they, by the way, are linked in the playlist. Yeah, because she was given sons, and bless her heart, Naomi had lost 3 sons.
Mm-hmm.
So, and these are sons who are going to be important in the 12 tribes of Israel. Um, Now, as we go on, Leah's relationship with Jacob does deepen, uh, but he still is in love with Rachel. And so Rachel, she's getting a little jealous over here, isn't she?
She is.
And going over into Genesis 30, when Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous. So she said to Jacob, give me children or I'll die. So she's really
She is
not
displeased.
happy. And she's blaming Jacob, instead of looking at God and looking at what she could be doing in her own life to make the situation better. So she's pretty demanding. Give me children or I'll die. Or she's that desperate, that she feels like if she doesn't have children, she's going to die. We don't really know how that comes off, but we do know Jacob didn't take that well.
Yeah,
And
Jacob was not happy.
yeah, and he even says, "Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children?" Kind of like, don't blame me. Um, and he has a track record. We know that he can have children, which is also, you can tell, putting some strain on them, because they're apparently arguing. This is a fight. This is an argument.
This would not have been a happy house to live in.
No.
Not at all.
Except where Leah is concerned, and she finds contentment later.
No, I'm not convinced.
She does.
She does.
Okay.
I'm skipping to chapter 30, verse 9.
Okay.
When Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children, she took her maid Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Then Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. And Leah said, "Good fortune," so she named him Gad.
But right before that, Rachel did the same thing with her servant.
Right.
So it's kind of a tit for tat there.
Yes, it is. But my point is, I don't think Leah resigned herself to the situation all that much.
I don't know. I think that her faith developed and her character developed as she went on through the years. So
maybe
we have Leah's servant who bore Jacob a second son later. So he has several sons by Leah, and then she has two more sons through her servant. But see here, this is how I think that she's starting to turn a little bit in her thinking. Verse 12, Genesis 30, verse 12. She goes on, verse 13. Leah says, "How happy I am. The women will call me happy." So she named the son Asher, and this is the one that's by her servant. So she had 3 sons, and now under her care there's 2 more through her servant. But she's starting to find some happiness here. Whereas, with the other children, she was, talking about being unloved. And then when the third one came, it's like, surely my husband and I will have an attachment now. And then now she's gone, I am happy. There are 2 more sons.
Yeah. Okay, I can see where you're coming from on that one.
And then, we go further on, and we have Reuben, and he goes out into the fields during the wheat harvest and brings in some mandrakes. And then Rachel wants those mandrakes. But yet, she and Leah work out a trade. Instead of asking the son, could she have some of those mandrakes, Rachel goes to Leah. And she's like, "Give me some of your son's mandrakes." And she's like, "Wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you take my son's mandrakes too?" So Rachel says, "Okay, fine. I'll let you sleep with Jacob tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes." I mean, so, she's still not being treated well. But they make the agreement, and then Leah goes out to meet Jacob and says, "Hey, would you sleep with me tonight? I traded Rachel these mandrakes of my sons so you would sleep with me." And so Jacob, being nice and obliging, he did so. And she conceived again. And she had another son.
I think one thing that is clear from Genesis 29 and 30 is that nobody treats anybody else well in these 2 chapters.
True. I would agree with that. But Leah is still evolving. Her character development as a person is still evolving. And look, in 17, it says, okay, wait a minute. You must sleep. Okay. In 17, it says, God listened to Leah as she became pregnant and bore Jacob a 5th son. And then she said, God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband. So she named her son Issachar.
That's interesting. I'm reading from the NRSV, verse 18. Leah said, God has given me my hire because I gave my maid to my husband. So she named him Issachar.
Okay, slightly different wording there. Okay.
And this is where
So,
having multiple translations comes in handy for things like this.
okay. So, up here in in verse 16 on the NIV, it says, Leah went out to. Okay, so when Jacob came in from the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him. You must sleep with me, she said. I have hired you with my son's mandrake. So he slept with her. So, okay, so I see where hire has come in on your translation, just not this one. It says, God rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband. And then she conceived again. You know, Rachel has to not be happy by this point because she's had, she had 3 sons. Her servant bore him 2 sons. Then she comes along, she gets pregnant again, and bears him another son. And then she has yet another son. And it's interesting. This is why I say her development, her faith is developing, because she says, Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a 6th son. Then she said, God has presented me with a precious gift. And then she's still hoping this time my husband will treat me with honor because I have borne him 6 sons. So she named him Zebulun.
Okay, so in the NRSV, verse 20 reads, Then Leah said, God has endowed me with a good dowry. Now my husband will honor me because I have borne him 6 sons. So she named him Zebulun.
So she's still not really, she doesn't really still have a good position in the household, except she's got these sons
And she's still wanting Jacob to
treat
do
her
his
well.
job.
And then later, she has another child, and gives birth to a daughter and named her Dinah or Dina, depending on who you want to talk to on that translation. So, and it wasn't until after all of this transpired that Rachel finally has a child. So God really closed Rachel's womb for quite some time.
For like a whole chapter and a half.
Well, but through that chapter and a half, there's a huge time span of all these years.
Yeah, it's not exactly a quick turnaround.
But it was such a big deal, okay, to have a son, that Rachel became pregnant and had a son, and then in verse 23, she says, God has taken away my disgrace. So while all this was happening with Leah, she's disgraced. Okay. All right. Dickie's Beer Review says Jesus wasn't white in the fairy tale Bible. No, Jesus was Middle Eastern. I have to disagree with you about Harry Potter being a better story than the Bible. I feel like there's a lot of individual stories in the Bible. Harry Potter is certainly a good book too, but there's a lot of good stories and a lot of good lessons in the Bible. So,
including how not to treat other people.
Including how not to treat other people, yeah. So anyway, Rachel was feeling a lot of disgrace because through all this, she hasn't had a child at all, much less a son. And then finally, she has a son. But look where her son is in the hierarchy. If you're talking about, inheriting, you've got all of Leah's sons, her first 3, and then there's Rachel's servant, and then 2 by her servant. So, and then she has more sons of her own. So all of her sons would have come first, and then there would have been her servant sons, and then there would have been Rachel's, right? Because of Rachel being the second wife, not the primary wife, and because of the way that tear fell.
Yes,
If
but
I'm understanding that right. Yes, but go ahead.
um, I don't. This is the Joseph with the coat, um, and I don't
Who
think.
tricked his dad?
Well, yes,
Yes,
but
go ahead.
um, I don't think Jacob. I think Jacob loved Rachel's children more than Leah's. And I think that comes into play in Joseph's story, but that's not what we're talking about
That's
today.
not what we're talking about yet. Yeah,
That's a whole nother live stream.
absolutely. So okay, so Rachel gives birth to her son Joseph, and after this, Jacob goes. He's finally got the son by Rachel, a child that he's also been what?
I had so I have a dry erase board hanging behind me
You
that you
used
can't
to?
see. And attached to it, I had a little magnetic, basically cup holder that I kept my dry erase markers in. And the glue, oh no, that wasn't what broke this time. It just came off.
Okay.
Last time it broke, it was
That
the
was the
glue that held the
thunderous
magnet.
crash.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. So anyway, after Rachel finally gives birth, that's when he goes to his father-in-law slash uncle and says, "Give me my wives. It's time for me to go. I've worked for you all these years. I am done. So give me my wives and send me on my way so I can go back to my own homeland." So 14 years has transpired before Rachel had a child. Because he had to work 7 years. No, I'm sorry, 7 years because he worked 7 to get Leah and then another 7 to be able to gain his freedom. So 7 years would have transpired. Then he says, "Send me on my way so I can go back to my own homeland. Give me my wives and children for whom I've served you, and I'll be on my way because you know how much work I've done for you." But Laban wasn't happy. He didn't want that to happen.
Laban was quite displeased.
So, Laban was like, if I found favor in your eyes, please stay. Then an interesting thing about his the Laban's faith, the household that both Leah and Rachel came out of, Laban learned by divination. He by divination that the Lord blessed him because of Jacob. Name your wages, I'll pay them. So he is into divination. He is not into following the Hebrew God. And then Jacob says, "You know how I've worked for you, how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly. And the Lord bless you whenever I've been. But now, when may I do something for my own household?" And you had talked about Jacob cheating him out of his flock. So do you want to go ahead and dive in there?
Sure. Picking up in 31. He said, "What shall I give you?" Jacob said, "You shall not give me anything. If you will do this for me, I will again feed your flock and keep it. Let me pass through all of your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep, and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and such shall be my wages." So my honesty will answer for me later when you come to look into my wages with you. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, shall be counted stolen. Laban said, Good, let it be as you have said. But that day Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had white on it, and every lamb that was black, and put them in charge of his sons. And he set a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob was pasturing the rest of Laban's flock. Then Jacob took fresh rods of poplar and almond and plane, and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the white of the rods. He set the rods that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the troughs, that is, the watering places where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the rods, and so the flocks produced young that were striped, speckled, and spotted. Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the striped and the completely black animals in the flock of Laban, and he put his own droves apart and did not put them with Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob laid the rods in the troughs before the eyes of the flock, that they might breed among the rods. But for the feebler of the flock he did not lay them there, so the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. Thus the man grew exceedingly rich, and had large flocks, and male and female slaves, and camels and donkeys.
So there you go. And that kind of destroyed his relationship with his father-in-law.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So, and also, Rachel and Leah had brothers, and they were watching all of this transpire, and they went to their dad and said, Hey, Jacob has taken away everything. And then Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude toward him had soured. Yeah. And that's when the Lord said to Jacob, so you remember, you have Laban doing the divination, and we have the Lord saying to Jacob, Go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be there with you. And we had Leah, who was raised with a father that was in divination, who was praising the Lord when she had some of the sons. So there's, to me, that's a real shift in her and in her beliefs. You know, even if she believes some in God, she still had the experience of having been around her father, which was who believed in divination, and that would have impacted her belief system. So okay, that's why I'm saying that her faith developed. Plus, you know, she had said that the Lord looked upon her affliction, and now my husband will love me. So at first, you know, in this passage, you know, going back into like Genesis, what was it, 29, 32. Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, It's because the Lord has seen my misery. You know, she doesn't say, My father's divination has figured out that I shall. No. She goes straight to, It's because the Lord has seen my misery. So that marks an initial shift. And then she goes into having a child, and she says, I will praise the Lord. So I think that's an indication. But she goes from this position on into being a valued member of the household. Let me skip on over. There's some discussion going on between Jacob and Laban for like more years, Laban tries to claim you deceived me and carried off my daughters and all that.
I
And
mean,
then,
okay, Jacob did deceive him.
but Laban also deceived Jacob. So it's like, going back and forth here. Um, then then they're having a discussion saying Laban answered, this is in 31:43. Laban answered Jacob, the women are my daughters, the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet, what can I do today about these daughters of mine or the children they have borne? Come and make a covenant. So they do a covenant, and there were witnesses to the covenant. But then as we go further, it talks about, and Jacob wrestles with God. But as we go further, when Leah passes away, and I'm looking for that passage, I
Let's
see that
see. There's Jacob appeasing
I didn't mark
Esau,
that.
wrestling with God. Jacob and Esau meeting. Let's see.
Oh, I can't believe I didn't mark that. But what winds up happening is when Leah passes away, she is buried with Jacob's parents. So she was there, buried with his parents. But when Rachel passes away, she didn't get buried with his parents. When Rachel died, she was buried on the way to Ephrath, and over her tomb, Jacob set up a pillar. And to this day, the pillar marks Rachel's tomb. So
Yes.
she was kind of buried on the side of the road, whereas Leah was given this honor, this position, and was buried basically in the family tomb. And there's a point in time where like bones are carried to another country when other people passed away, and so they could be buried, with honor in a different place. And they could have done that with Rachel and did not. So even though Rachel was beloved by Jacob at first, with Leah, it wound up being totally, I don't want to say totally the opposite, but she wound up being really honored, by being placed in the family plot next to Jacob's parents. Not that his, you know. So let's look at some of the questions. You want to?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Okay. So let's pull those up. And the questions are down there in the description box. There's the Bible study guide. 2 downloads are available on Google Drive. The study guide and a personal prayer journal. Those are both free. You can download them, and we don't ask for an email address or anything like that. You're not registering for anything. It's just a Google Drive link. So you can get those questions. And if you scroll all the way down, at least after this broadcast, then you'll come to the questions for Leah. And this does change in order just a little bit as the live streams are done. So
I also just put the first question in the chat.
Okay. So who was Leah? Well, Leah was Laban's daughter, would have been Jacob's cousin, and would have been Jacob's mother's niece. So that's how all of that fit together. And the first wife there of Jacob.
The wife he got that he didn't want.
Right. Yeah. So, question 2, what was the significance of Leah being chosen as Jacob's wife instead of her younger sister, Rachel? What was that? Hey, Butterroll Boutique is in. How are you? It's good to see you. Y'all, go check her channel out. She is a neat lady. So, okay. Who was the significance? Well, the significance of Leah's relationship, of her being chosen as Jacob's wife, number one is the fact that older sisters married first. And that's the way it was. Laban even said that. We have this tradition, this custom of older sisters first.
But it's also significant because Laban hoodwinked Jacob.
That's true. So you've got that. And I think it's also significant that she gave birth. The oldest daughter gave birth to the first son of Jacob. So, she gave birth to the older son. So I think that makes it significant too. Also, she had, the several sons. What do you think?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Number three, how did Leah's relationship with Jacob evolve over time, considering his preference for Rachel? And I think that her relationship shifted to become a little deeper in God. Because we talked about her progression from the first son into, then a couple of sons later, she's praising God. And then, it's just that I just think it's really cool that it developed.
Yeah, it definitely did develop.
I'm not sure her relationship with Jacob ever really got great, even after all the sons. But yet she
But
got
if you,
this revered position.
yeah,
Okay.
but if you buried her with his family, then it apparently evolved from nothing into something.
Yeah, that's why it says she got the revered position. But I still don't think it was. There's no indication that it had the love that she really wanted from Jacob. More that she, kind of came to terms and was satisfied,
Oh
but
yeah, no, I
didn't
definitely agree with you there.
necessarily. Um, and Butterroll Boutique is waving. So awesome. She says she's hanging in there, which is great. And she's waving. Which, if you go into the chat, you can actually see the pink hand waving. It just doesn't come across on StreamYard. So that's so cool. Thank you. All right. Let's see. What was the other question? How did Leah's faith and trust in God impact her life and relationship with Jacob? I think we kind of talked about that.
I think so too.
So, okay, we'll go on into number 5. In what ways did Leah's identity and self worth shift throughout her life? I think at first she was very complacent because her father tricked Jacob with her, and it doesn't indicate that she really had any say in that at all. So she goes from that, and she leaves the house where her father was involved in divination and started really trusting God, and he honored that by continuing to give her sons. I think. What's your take?
Yeah. I think I've lost track of what question we're on. We're on Leah's faith and trust in God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then I clicked on the wrong thing.
And then I think through that, Jacob, his attitude shifted just because of how he treated the wives when they passed away. That tells us a lot.
Yeah, I agree.
So, all right. So the next question, what have you got?
Now I can post it. In what
What
ways did Leah's identity and self-worth shift throughout her life?
yeah. I think we talked about that too. What do you think?
I agree.
So, okay. Then moving on down. How does Leah's story resonate with themes of acceptance, unconditional love, and personal fulfillment? Wow, there's a lot there.
That's a lot.
Okay. Themes of acceptance. She accepted marrying Jacob for the first thing. Because she didn't flee. She could have
That's
fled.
true.
She didn't flee. Um, she didn't refuse. Even if she couldn't refuse her dad, she didn't refuse Jacob. She bore him sons. So, and I think that there's some signs that she really loved her family, her
Yes.
sons. So I think there we have some unconditional love. And I think she found fulfillment through her love and taking care of the kids, her children.
Yeah, yes, that's definitely plausible.
Because,
Unfortunately, this is written from not her perspective, so we don't get a lot of her internal or any of her internal dialogue. But from the little we do know, yes.
yeah. And then let's see. How can we apply the lessons of Leah in our own lives? Sometimes you just want to go, is this a trick question? How did we come up with these? Um, well, I think for one thing, holding the faith is one of the lessons. And when things are difficult and we don't agree with them, we can hold the faith. What do you think?
I agree.
Seminary grad.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that, like some of the other women we've studied, um, staying true to our faith when external circumstances are not great.
I agree because circumstances certainly were not great for her.
Yeah, no, they were not. They were no, just no.
And loving our family
Mhm.
throughout the difficulties, as she must have to have gotten that favored position, because it shifted. She was unloved, but then she at least later on became favored because
Mhm.
she was put in the essentially family cemetery, and we have Rachel, who was buried basically on the side of the road with a little marker. Um, so it's the total shift.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that perseverance, because at any point she could have run away. At any point she could have gone to her father and said, "Look, this really isn't working. Marry me to somebody else." Um, but she didn't. So I think perseverance, loving your family, and I think that um, keeping the faith.
Yep, I would agree.
Those are my takeaways. And you agree?
Yep.
Yay. All righty then. So in agreement. Okay. All right. So you all, thank you for tuning in. Next week, we are going to have a premiere because I don't know where I'll be. I am leaving on a mission trip. You never know where God's going to take you. All right. So I am leaving to go on a missions trip. I'm super excited about it. Going to Alaska, to a small town outside of Wasilla. I am super stoked. I am also nervous as heck because of the weather. So do keep me in prayer. I'll be back mid-August of 23. This is July of 23, and it's going to be a long drive. It's a hard drive. I have not decided on the route yet, and that is because of the weather and the smoke. So,
A lot
do
of
I
things to
go?
consider.
Yeah, like do I go straight out 40 and go via a few different states and head north, or do I go which has got heat? We all know Texas is hot right now. So do I do the heat and go out that way, or do I go through all the smoke that's in the U.S. before getting into British Columbia, where I know I'm going to have smoke difficulties? So heat or smoke? Those are my choices. So keep me in prayer. And Stellar's like, oh Lord,
It's like you're having to choose between the frying pan and the fire. But in this case, I'm going
yeah.
to go for the frying pan.
Well, last time I wound up driving through fire on both sides of the road. That got kind of interesting.
Yeah, we're hoping for not that.
Yeah, definitely not that. So, y'all do keep me in prayer, and I'll come back when I get back and fill you all in on how it went. And if you go to my other channel at Be Bodacious, then you'll be able to see some of the little videos and shorts that I'll be popping up. So, all right. Well, thank you all. We'll see you next week. It's going to be a premiere. We're talking about Lydia. So check out those questions, which are already posted, and come join the premiere next week. So thanks for watching. We'll see you Sunday on the premiere. Good night, everyone.